So, yeah, in this video, really, what I want to just go over is the feeling of overwhelm, of there being so much to do, so much that someone's dealing with, plus all the stuff that they have to do, and really just kind of highlight, what is feeling overwhelmed? Is it normal? What are some common signs? But then also to highlight a couple really good strategies that I both personally and professionally find is quite helpful when you're feeling overwhelmed. And so, yeah, we're really just I have a little blog written here. I'm gonna use it as kind of a skeleton, if you will, to organize some of my thoughts, keep them so they don't go too mixed matched on and down too many rabbit holes, hopefully. But sometimes those rabbit holes are the fun parts of a conversation when you let your mind. Yeah, so really there's a lot of reasons why a person can feel overwhelmed. One of those things is that there's so much to do in life. Many of those things that we want to do come from our responsibilities, but and I'm going to get into that later in the video. It's not very fun to feel overwhelmed. And so what I'm going to do is just go through this list, talk on it for a little bit. I'm going to chunk up this video a bit. We'll see where it goes. Really what we're looking at here is mastering the endless to-do list. Going from feeling overwhelmed at all the things there are to do in a day, in a week, in a life, to being efficient and effective in one's decisions at every step. And so the nature of this entire, this blog that I've written, this video, it revolves around a to-do list. Some people don't like to-do lists. I, for one, really do. So if you don't like to-do lists, you can stop watching. However, I would just encourage you to have an open mind towards them, and you might be able to see how they can be quite helpful. Because this to-do list is never going to get done. I'm going to tell you that right now. The list will never be complete. That can be very scary and aggravating for some people. It can also be freeing for a lot of people and relieve that pressure of, oh my God, do I ever have to I never get my list done. I've done this for years, done everything out. I never get it all done. It's like, well, maybe there's a reason for that. And I'm going to be exploring that a bit in this video. So I'm just going to read on and let my mind wander a bit, expand upon some sections where it seems noteworthy. But I'm going to try to stick to what I've written, because otherwise what will end up happening is I'll probably speak ahead of myself, and then I'll be covering something in a lot more detail down here where I've thought it out for the past couple weeks. And I might just end up double speaking a whole bunch. So I'll try and not let my mind wander too much, but yeah, let's have a go at her. So, to-do lists, do to-do lists ever really get done? They seem to always be in constant flux. Things on the list change in today's fast-paced world, and managing this endless to-do list can feel like a constant uphill battle that never gets done. Whether it's work deadlines, family responsibilities, personal goals, this feeling of overwhelm can creep in and paralyze one's progress. This guide and this video, I'm going to go over why feeling overwhelmed happens, some practical methods to tackle it, and the role of attitudes and how to make decisions that lead to efficiency and effectiveness. As a Kelowna therapist, I often help clients navigate these challenges with empathy and tailored strategies to them. So let's break it down step by step and focus on some decisions that can empower you. So our first one here. So, is it normal to feel overwhelmed at work or in life? Yes. Yes, it is. It's not a comfortable feeling, but it's well within the the multitude or the range, the spectrum of emotions that humans can feel. We don't feel emotions that aren't on that spectrum, really. Biology, or whatever you tend to believe in, has gifted humans with this sense of overwhelm. And it can be both and look, I'm already going off script, but I always view emotions as, some emotions are very uncomfortable, but they always point at something. And feeling overwhelmed points to certain things. And I'm not gonna speak on that anymore because I know I have that covered later on. Yeah, but maybe I will speak on it a bit. It's not inherently bad or good that you feel overwhelmed or don't feel overwhelmed. Maybe if you're not, it means that you're not pushing yourself and you're not reaching for the highest potential that you could. But feeling overwhelmed might mean that, okay, maybe you've reached a little too far and you're beginning to fall off that ladder, or not be able to perform or comfortably perform. And it's all bracketed in this. For some people, their sense of overwhelm is going to be more or less than their neighbor, their friend, an individual like Elon Musk that seems to do everything the world around, and it doesn't seem to be any worse for the wear. And so I think it's an entirely normal feeling. And I want you to really think of anyone in your life that you haven't seen stressed out. And I'm not talking about chronic stress, they always seem to be that way, but a figure where, most of the time they're relaxed, or they seem pretty confident, they're able to get everything done, or going with the flow. And then once in a while these things they seem like, okay, that person seems not their usual self. So if someone comes to mind, I encourage you to ask them about their most stressful moment in their life. I'm sure they will have a response. This feeling of overwhelm often stems from high expectations, unexpected changes, or simply the sheer volume of tasks demanding our time and energy, which, if you're watching this video, you're very likely aware that those are limited resources. We only have so much energy in a day. We only have so much time in a day. If you're getting a proper sleep, so there's 8 hours out of 24, there's a third of your day gone. If, breakfast, lunch, and dinner might take between an hour and 2 for some people. Transportation, driving around, might take another hour. So you're already at 2 or 3 extra there. Getting some movement in with the day, maybe like an hour walk. So you're already down 3 or 4 hours plus already half your day's gone in kind of just basic functioning activities to kind of be a person in society. A relatively healthy person, that is. Yeah, you could get less sleep, you could not eat, not move your body, but I would strongly discourage those things. Keeping yourself healthy and your mind clear and getting some blood flow to that, getting good rest and clearing out the waste from the days and weeks prior. Those are some of the most foundational things that you can do to help with overwhelm. But so you can see, there's only so much time in a day, and we only have so much energy for tasks. And where they're limited, when we begin to stretch at that or overwhelm this limited system, that's when this feeling of overwhelm begins to creep in. And sometimes it can happen very suddenly. Other times it can just almost build and build and build until there might be like a breaking point, like one final stressful thing, like someone cuts you off in traffic, or you have to slam on your brakes really hard, or the elevator in your building is down and you have to take the stairs and you're already in a terrible rush and you did not have time for that extra 5 minutes to go up umpteen flights of stairs, and that it can creep in a sense. Sometimes these tasks that we're looking at bring us closer to the goals that we want, and we actually really enjoy doing them. For instance, maybe you really love your job, and there's some there's aspects about your job that you really love. You love solving this project or figuring out the puzzle of your aspect of your career. And then other times it might be things that we do begrudgingly, but they got to get done. Or rather, it'd be very preferable to get them done. It might be cleaning the bathroom. I don't know many people who love scrubbing a toilet. A lot of people love the satisfaction after the fact, walking in there again and everything's fresh and clean. But if you let that environment go for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, like like back in old college days, whose responsibility is to clean it, and it ends up not happening for longer. That's way in the past for me, but it's a lot more preferable to be in a clean environment in that sense than not. And so that takes time, it takes energy. And some of these tasks are going to be begrudgingly thrust upon us. And so as a counselor here in Kelowna, I see many clients experiencing this due to the pressures that come with having these responsibilities, whether it's balancing work, school, personal life, family, or any combination of those, or all of those. And so really, like, what the crux of it is there's a fine line between a kind of positive stress and pressure, and you're striving and you want to get things done, and you're burning the midnight oil. There's a fine line between that and being productive and still having some forward movement, and then getting so overwhelmed that nothing ends up getting done, or very minimal things end up getting done, despite wanting to get these things done. And so this is the classic sign of overwhelm. The intention is there to finally get that thing, to be doing it or feeling that way, but the execution falters despite the desire. Your brain, it's flooded in this example, in this point in time. Your brain is flooded with these tasks and loose ends. It enters a state of analysis paralysis. You know what needs to be doing or needs to be done, but the mental clutter makes starting feel just impossible. It's not laziness, it's a protective response to avoid failure or further burnout. It's your brain's way of saying, I need some more time to assess all of this, to figure this out, to, really, like, it's a slowing response, like the overwhelm. It slows everything down. Your brain is saying, this is too much. Whoa, pause. Like, if I do all of this, or if I attempt to do all of this, it's not going to work. It's not working for me. So we got to slow down and pause and reflect a bit. And see, that's where we get into the emotions of overwhelm. And, is it a pro or a con? Some might say, in some cases, it is a con. You're not getting anything done. In other times, though, almost forces a reflective period on your life to reassess things and say, okay, what is a top priority for me to do? Do I need to be doing this thing over that other thing? What is important? Is this emotion drives this assessment, which I think is quite a positive aspect of it, although it might be an uncomfortable way to go about it. And that's why you don't want to spend a lot of time feeling overwhelmed. It's not would you rather be motivated to prioritize things and assess your life from a point of, oh my God, like panic, blah, put your foot on the brake right now, or, okay, I've spent some time to reflect on these things, I know what to do. Yeah, these things are very motivating to me. I'd really enjoy these tasks, but fitting everything in. Like, it's what do you want to be motivated by? Pressure and strain, or by productive, meaningful forward advancement, I suppose. And both might get you to the same goal eventually, but one is going to be a lot more comfortable and a higher quality of life as you go about it. When you're feeling overwhelmed with work and life and it's starting to impact your quality of life, that's really, again, I might end up saying this a bunch in this video, in other videos as well, but it's like all these emotions, very fine lines between some positive pressure to get that thing done, and it's counterintuitive to my intention. And really, it's for you to determine this, but is it impacting your quality of life in a way that you think is unreasonable by your definition? That's where almost every emotion kind of flips. It's like, I can be very frustrated at a manager at work. That might be perfectly reasonable. Maybe they're a bit of a prick or something. I don't know. But is it reasonable to have an outburst in anger that then causes you to lose your job? Like, is that in your best interests? It might be if you're at the end of the line and you already have another job lined up. But if you're kind of living paycheck to paycheck, and you have to, not that you have to, but based on your other priorities in life, you have to kind of manage that emotion and find some other vent off in your life. That's really like where we get into it. It's like your quality of life is the determinant in, is this emotion, this thought, this behavior working for me? And if not, okay, that's when we intervene and we kind of identify it and say, okay, it's impacting your quality of life more than you'd expect it to, more than you think is necessary, what have you. But with overwhelm, it doesn't often stay contained to the specific areas of your life it's related to. So let's say it's just in work. The whole rest of your life is going pretty great, but work, it's way too demanding, way too much pressure, not enough, communication, what have you. Often this sense of feeling overwhelmed can so easily spill over into, your personal relationships outside of work, your health and well-being across many facets of life. You might experience anxiety, irritability, sleep issues, headaches, exhaustion. All of these things are going to play into your life outside of work in this example. If left unaddressed, this can lead to just chronic, stress-reduced performance and a diminished sense of joy in your daily life. You're sitting at home on the couch watching your favorite show with your partner, and it's like, oh my God, I have to deal with that thing at work tomorrow. It's taking away from that moment that really has nothing to do with work, but it's become, so now it's entering this, it's crossing the barrier. Each task and hope comes with strain and stress, which accumulate and compound over time. That's kind of one of the fundamental aspects of it too, is like, as you take on tasks and responsibilities, there's often the hope there that it's going to improve your quality of life or your future in some way, right? But there's often things you have to do. Again, going up further in the list, some of these you enjoy doing, some of them you do begrudgingly. But if you get too much of these things going on at one point in time, then that stress begins to build. That's when it accumulates and compounds, and now it might not even be that much. It might be instead of falling to sleep right away or in 10 or 15 minutes, you're tossing and turning every night for half an hour due to stress. And that half hour less of sleep, give that 6 months. And you're going to be noticing, at the gym, I used to be able to lift more or have more energy for my full workout. Now something seems, I'm just, at month 4, it's so hard to get up in the morning. It's, I'm having to decrease the weights that I'm doing, what have you. This is how it kind of shows up in a person's life. And so now we're really going to get into some methods that help when you're feeling overwhelmed and when you decide to take action. Because it's, at first you got to recognize that things aren't working, right? You've recognized your quality of life just isn't so. It wasn't what you planned for. When you look back 5 years, did that version of yourself, that past self, envision you in this life, dealing with this type of stress? Does it think that stress is reasonable, given the responsibilities, the benefits of that stress? This might be some good news, right? How do you deal with this? So how do you regain control? Well, you can by deciding to act intentionally. You start small, like acknowledging the fact that this overwhelm is affecting your life more than you think is reasonable or necessary. There's a tipping point where that pressure is helpful or reasonable to a degree and not so, as we've mentioned several times. Acknowledging that so far this feeling isn't what I set out to have, and it's counterproductive. So here's some practical methods to help with that. I think half of them are like a super one. It's like all derived from this small notebook, and I'll get into that in a moment. But then there's there's 3 in total here, and actually if you count the attitudes, 4. This first one is all about this list. So use a small notebook to write down your lists and refer back to into the future. And this is where you're going to develop your just ongoing list. And this is something I passionately use. I'm not going to get my garbage pail in my thing here. Like I can kind of show you. I've had this little to-do planner for, yeah, like I don't know how much you can see there, but it's just like lists upon list, and I can't even tell you how many times I took stuff and then added it to this page. And, oh, okay, added it to this page. Didn't get it done this week. And some things I just ended up being like, that's not a priority. It's been on my list for a month. New things continually are springing up. I'm gonna like walk through how to construct that. And look, I know phones are such amazing tools, but they are complete distraction magnets. It's so easy to go on a phone or app or to Google something with productive intentions in mind, but then get caught up doing something completely unintentional. And after a long period of time as well, because of those darned algorithms that are just tuned so perfectly, you know, getting some interesting videos all the time. And so that's why I really encourage you. I know every single therapist help thing that really is out there on the internet is, you know, get a notebook, write down thoughts, write down to-do lists. But that is why, in my opinion, it's that the phones are so easily to be distracted. Like while you're on there writing your to-do list, a text comes in, and you know, now you're completely out of that, and you are, you know, messaging that person, or they're like, you know, planning something with them, or like what, and even the worst is if someone messages you on like a social media app, and then you go on and have your chat with them. Oh, I'll get back to the list. But then you just hit one button and you're in your feed. And it's not a lot of time. You're talking, you know, might be a 10 or 15 minute scroll, but you could probably have gotten this task done in that time. And so that's why I will pretty much always suggest to ditch the digital apps for a tangible notebook or pad. They are a $10 investment. Like I think this planner was $10 or $15 on Amazon. I got it 2 or 3 years ago. I'm only halfway through it. I also use these little things too, but it's a small investment, like $15 for years of help with stress seems like a good investment to me. And so jot down these tasks as they arrive, and then review and refine them regularly. And I'm gonna get down to that in a bit. Getting organized is incredibly helpful when you're going through life. Develop this habit. Getting the things that you want to get done onto paper, like one of the benefits is that it significantly slows down that whirlwind where it's like, okay, I gotta get the oil changed. I gotta, you know, there's a family thing in a month. What am I bringing for dinner? There's so like all these loose ends they're floating around, and they come in, and you think on it for 30 seconds to a couple minutes, reach a conclusion that you've probably came to that conclusion before, but it's unfinished. Then it kind of goes back into this whirlwind, and you know, it might come back in a week. Okay, now I got 3 weeks to plan. What am I bringing for dinner? Oh my goodness. By putting these things down onto paper, it kind of provides some anchor points to move on to the next steps beyond just the task's name, to jot down some thoughts that you have. Okay, I'm bringing lasagna. I'm bringing, you know, pizza, Caesar salad, and chocolate milk. That's the best thing anybody can ever eat, really. Then you can kind of, it's like, okay, it's on your list. What am I bringing for supper? It's there. Okay, the next time that thought comes into your mind, it's like, oh, I already know I need to address this. I'm going to be seeing it every day when I'm referring to my list. You know, I might be able to jot down, oh, you know, I saw this thing at Costco last week, sparked an idea. Jot it down, like, oh, okay, now I got 2 or 3 ideas for what to bring. It's not floating anymore. But those anchor points allow you to move on to the next steps beyond just the task name or just up there in the whirlwind, and begin to examine the next steps. What comes after the fact that I know I need to or would prefer to get this thing done? What's next? When and how will I go about that? And so this practice of to-do lists closely follows the principles of something called Kydland's Law. And so it goes as follows. Any problem, when divided and examined into smaller, more manageable components, becomes half as complex and overwhelming. Or in other words, if you write down a problem clearly and specifically, you've already solved half of it. Wouldn't that be nice to have half of your sense of overwhelm cut off at the knees? And you still got to do a lot of stuff once you sort these things out and organize the things, but wouldn't that be nice to have like an immediate reduction of that magnitude in this sense of overwhelm? And so here's how to structure the list. It's going to be a bit different, like I mentioned above. It's this list you're never going to get done, and we kind of go into that in a little bit, but it will never be completed. I'm telling you that right now. It will be continually recycled and renew itself week by week as things are completed and wilt, and or new or reoccurring responsibilities spring up. And so the first part here is the possible and, oh, I messed that up. Oh my good. I'm just going to spell and desired task list. So I don't know how this might be horrible for you guys to look at, but the possible and desired task list discovery. I recommend doing this on Sunday. That's what works for me most Sundays, getting ready for the week ahead. But do it on whatever day feels like a natural reset in your pattern for you. Maybe you're working in like 2-week stints or working shift work or what have you, and just whatever day seems like a natural rest and recovery day. Tack this onto there and you're prepping for the next week, the next 2 weeks, the next month. I often do it a week at a time, but whatever fits into your life. This is just a list on, where you're going to brainstorm all the potential tasks for the week ahead or the period of time ahead. I would suggest, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed right now, don't do it like a month in advance. It's just too abstract, because then you begin to say, okay, what am I doing this week? What can I get done? I have all these things I want to do in a month. It's like, what are you doing this week? And then from there you can kind of chunk it down into the days. You're going to brainstorm all the potential tasks for the week ahead. Throughout that past week, you've been kind of writing down some things as well in this brainstorm area. I'm just going to write some things down, just some like little points. Then what you're going to do is take the new things that have come up from the past week, the new things from this session. It's like, okay, what do I need to get done? And then the things that were left over from the past week that you didn't get done. And you're going to amalgamate all these tasks jotted down and left unfinished from that previous week. And this whole part of it, the possible and desired tasks list, is to capture old and newer ideas and keep things top of mind. So much of, and I'll say this to my clients all the time, but so much of just doing something is remembering to do it. It's so easy to forget, and there might be something that's like, it would take maybe 5 or 10 minutes to sit down and think what you're bringing for dinner to that family thing in a month. For a multitude of reasons, you get distracted as you're thinking about it. The person that you're communicating that with isn't available at that moment, and just you forget to think about it again. But then it kind of creeps in again at some point. And so this is just helping keep everything top of mind. What do I want to get done to help advance me towards my goals? So list everything down to the finest grain you feel is needed. It could be from getting dressed each day. Hopefully before going out and about in downtown or into society, grocery shopping, career planning, in this task discovery section. What's important. And then you're going to scan this list and begin to decide, what can I realistically fit into my schedule in this chunk of time before I'm doing this exact step again? What can I realistically get done? And as you're doing this is where you're going to begin to kind of funnel into the second part of this list. So the prioritized essentials. The prioritized essentials list. So from these possible and desired tasks, select and rank the top priorities based on your goals. You could use a simple system like numbering high to low, putting things into bucket, urgent versus important. So put a limiter on yourself. This is where it's you're already feeling overwhelmed, right? That's probably why you're watching this video. Might be why you're reading my blog. But you're already feeling overwhelmed that all these things have to get done, and nothing or minimal things are getting done in this case. Target a number of tasks that you think you can realistically and importantly, confidently complete each day. This could be like, or this could look like limiting the number of these essential tasks to 1 a day, to 3, 5, 10 essentials today, or a day per day, ordered by their impact. You might have, it's important to move your body, eat well, get a good sleep, complete a project or two at work, or pick at that project or two at work for an hour or two at a time, whatever seems reasonable for you. It's often a lot more helpful to start small and build momentum and confidence than it is to start at a high number where you're already overwhelmed with this high number, and then restart that feeling of overwhelm creeping in all over again. So as you're picking through this list, ask yourself, what if I don't do this week? What are the consequences? You're going to prioritize these things based on the consequences. Is it short term? Is it long term? Your values? You might be at a period in your life where something that is a high priority and might not impact you at all in the short term, but long term might impact you. You might look at, okay, for this week, I am, instead of going for like an hour and a half gym session every day, I'm going to just do a half-hour walk. I really need that hour. In the short term, it's not going to impact you all that much. I would always personally prioritize like moving the body, but every person's different. This is just an example. But you might need that hour because it's you're a tax accountant and it's April and there's so much to do at work, and that hour you could you could do a lot with that hour at this point in time in your life, and the short-term consequences of not getting that done outweigh the long-term, well, it might be short and long. It might be your reputation, your job. You might be willing to sacrifice a little bit and go for less of a walk, perhaps, for this, couple weeks or month, or this week in instance. And so prioritize it based on the consequences, but also importantly, your values. If getting to the gym every day and feeling that relaxation that comes after the fact is just an important aspect of who you are as a person. Like you value your health very highly, right? Which I think personally a lot of people should. I think it should be almost one of the top priorities, always. But then it's like, okay, the consequences might not be that bad, but I really value this aspect of myself. If I don't get to the gym, I'm gonna feel like like sluggish the rest of the day. I know I need that for my mental clarity, just my confidence about the day that I completed something, what have you. It's all these things are for you to decide what the consequences are, how important those consequences are to you, and the values at play for you as an individual. But just rank those things. What needs to, I need to pick at some projects for at least a couple hours a day. I need to do my laundry, etc. Maybe the laundry can wait. You can let it, you have enough clothes kind of in reserve that, as long as you have underwear, you can last 2 weeks without doing laundry if it comes to it, or what have you. This is where you're going to be prioritizing, ranking these things. And it's like, okay, what needs to get done? What this is going to look like is, you're going to be, there's going to be tasks up here. And you're going to be, okay, like number 1 seems to be this. Number 2 seems to be that. Number 3 seems to be that. So you can see here, like, I don't know where my head is in this photo, but you can see here, like, these are all things from last week, things that you've jotted down that have kind of sprung into your mind. recurring things that happen each week. It's like, okay, what are the priorities to get done this week? And then from there, you can kind of say, okay, I want to get done, maybe 3 to 5, 3 to 5 of these things each and every day, or maybe it's 1. Then you start picking through, okay, Monday I can tackle like this top priority things. And I will always suggest to, and this goes in a lot of areas of life, but to give yourself a bit of breathing room. If you think you can do 3 to 5, maybe even pick, okay, I'm going to do 2 to 4 things. If 3 to 5 comes off the top of your mind, take it down just a bit, because you can always readjust this, see how your week went, see how this works for you. Because you might find that maybe these things that are the top priorities, things at work, doing things to help maintain your relationships, what have you. You might plan to, go to a nice party or something, a nice dinner, and that's only going to take 2 or 3 hours of your time. But then you end up having a great time, and you're there all evening. And it's like you planned to do maybe something down here when you got back, or get a really good sleep to revitalize yourself, and now you find yourself with not such a good sleep, but always give yourself a bit of a buffer would be my suggestion. With this list, one of the most important things, where it is a continually evolving and renewing list, is to assume that something will always be left undone. And this is to acknowledge the fact that even to the smallest of degrees, the truth in the fact that perfection is unattainable. In the moment, that is. Perhaps in reflection, you might see perfection in the process, actually. Look back on these moments of your life, with quite fondness. But decide to focus on what truly matters and let go of the rest, the compulsion to always be productive and efficient and to get everything done. Right? Like this grip is in part contributing to this sense of overwhelm. Like, I have to get that done. I said yes to this. I'm known as this person who does X, Y, Z. I can't not be that person. I can't fall short. Again, some of those things, maybe that's the truth. If that's the truth and the honest truth in your life, then it might be, okay, that is very high on my priority list to be that person at work. So how can I perhaps reduce responsibilities in my personal life so I can get a good rest, come into work each day and, drain the tank during work and rest and recoup in my personal life, or vice versa. Like, how can I'm so stressed at work, I'm unable to enjoy my life outside of work. How can I, take some load off so that I can do that yard work I've been putting off, or, complete that project that I've, been telling my partner for months or even years at a time, I'll get that done. I'll tidy up that area of the yard or what have you. So this mindset of accepting that things will be left undone, it frees mental energy spent toiling over the fact that we're human. To demand perfection and impossibility and to be disappointed in ourselves when we fall short is very human, and it's just counterproductive to a lot of goals, really. So what you're going to do is then, at the end of the day or the week, review your list of what you hoped to get done and consciously mark uncompleted tasks or goals just as deferred, adding them on to the most updated list as needed. If they are truly important, their priority and position on that new list will likely see them moving closer to the top, right? So in that example with the dinner idea for the family potluck, right? Maybe 3 months out, it's not that high of a priority. You can keep shunting that off. It's on your list, it's on your mind. It's not contributing so much to the whirlwind. It needs to be addressed, but it's not that high of a priority. And then one thing after another, now it's a week before the potluck. Everybody else has selected their meals that they're bringing. No duplicates, obviously. And that pressure you might see it being like, okay, I need to spend 10 or 15 minutes here deciding on what I'm bringing and make a plan. I'm going to the grocery store, whenever you go. And that's a high priority at this point. So you'll naturally just see things. It almost takes a burden of some of the responsibility off of it as well. Like, there's a lot of things that a person wants to get done in a day or a week or in a life that seem very important, right, at the time. But this list will have a way of naturally helping you sort that through as it gets recycled and take some of that burden off of you to have to really think, okay, how much of a priority is this? You can have somewhat of a principle or rule in there. This might be a good point to write down, but something where if you have to think on the priority level of something, maybe like above or below level 5 on your scale, right? Then just don't even think on it. Just put it on your list. It's down below with the other ones. And as time progresses, it might even fall off your list. You'd be surprised how many times that happens. It's just, something I thought that was so important to get done just isn't necessary, right? It's I was making a mountain of a molehill. I don't need to see that person or say this thing or do this thing. It's not, I don't actually care that much, right? Now the next point to help with feelings of overwhelm is shrinking your context window. And so this refers to the time you allot to certain tasks on your list. So to counter overwhelm, you're going to want to narrow your focus into reasonable and manageable to you batches. That number will be different for everybody, but if you find yourself getting bored or exhausted and unable to concentrate or be intentional with a specific task, let's say, after 30 minutes, commit to only doing that task for 20 or 25 minutes at a time. This doesn't mean that you're just going to leave it there and only do that thing for 25 minutes. But what you're going to do is you're going to take a break. Or personally, and my favorite, is having multiple tasks running in parallel that are different from one another. It's not going to be picking away at an Excel sheet. It's not going to be, plus, having 5 different Excel sheets open, doing all of them and going one to one. But rather it might be blog writing or, making a video recording, kind of to do in, close succession to one another. You're kind of picking at one, going on to the next. And so why I love this so much is that it keeps things fresh for your brain. It works out different parts of it. It helps protect against boredom or complacency during the task. So like once that intention begins to fade, the energy, the curiosity when you're doing a task. So this could be going from blog writing to doing some household chores. And so this decision to limit that scope reduces the cognitive load and boosts completion rates and efficiency. And so I want you to think of this. So let's say you often commit to an hour of work at a time before a break. And then at the start of the task, you're fresh, you're efficient, you're picking at things. You might find that you complete over 50% of that task in that first 10, 20, 30 minutes. But then as time goes on and your ability or your concentration begins to wane, that's when it can be like, okay, I'm doing like the last half of the task in, more time than at the start, perhaps. So this method of catching yourself right before that, switching to something else, running in parallel, cleaning up the kitchen, doing that load of laundry, right? Folding it and putting it away. It kind of keeps you in this peak efficiency window for more times throughout the day. You pick at a blog, pick at a work task, and then you go, fold some laundry or switch tasks to something new, to something fresh. And then you do that one for half an hour. Right? Or maybe that one's, you really love doing it and you can lose track of time in it for an hour. Who knows? yeah, it keeps you at that efficiency window for more times throughout the day. Another component that can help you both make lists and then also to just complement your behaviors as you're doing the things on your list is healthy attitudes, right? You know, these tools and notebooks alone often aren't enough. Your mindset matters quite a bit. Attitudes shape how you approach lists and decisions moment to moment, task by task, turning strategies into sustainable habits. Show yourself kindness and forgiveness when you're struggling to complete your responsibilities and goals, right? That part above, like assume something will always get undone. Shifting from criticism to positively recognizing that you can only do so much. And when you push yourself too hard for too long, overwhelm happens, which could be why you're still watching this video. Everyone will have their own capacity in a given day and for a given task. But with focused and intentional practice, you can expand these aspects. But there's a degree of a kind of acceptance in where you're at right now, and taking the time to learn your own capacity and playing it accordingly can go a long way to managing overwhelm, right? That being kind, the forgiving yourself for not getting every single thing on that list. Right? Sometimes there can be almost a relationship with the future self, or the future self is kind of this optimal, ideal individual who is perfect in nature and can be somewhat of a tyrant to your present self, where it's saying, okay, if you don't get this done, I'm going to, treat you kind of poorly. You're going to feel poorly about yourself. You have to get it all done. Maybe so that way your future self can have an easier time. But then what often ends up happening, you eventually become your future self to the newer tyrannical version of yourself that's so demanding, that's unreasonable. It's like contributing to this as well. So like asking yourself, does your attitude yield good results, right? Again, coming back to this point of, does your attitude in completing this task, do the ends justify the means? Right? Is my current mindset helping me or hindering my goals here? If lists feel like a burden to you, try adjusting your perspective on them. View them as allies for freedom, not as chains that you have to get them all done, but these lists help you organize your thoughts. Consider how you evaluate your day's work and avoid self-critical views if you accomplish alternative tasks or do things that your soul really needs. Isn't necessarily productive in the sense that you mean or that you intended, but there's certainly some use to the behaviors and thoughts that you engage in daily. They're often protective. Although if you find your goals aren't being met, perhaps you need less protection, and let the curious, exploring part of you have the light of day, even if for a glimpse. The attitudes that are very pressuring and get it done, you're no good because you didn't get it done, they often are protective in nature, right? Like they want a better life for you is in essence. They want you to see you hit the goal. But is sitting on the couch or laying in bed with your mind racing and feeling poorly about yourself, does that help you get to your goal? It might for some people, right? Some people thrive on pressure and this kind of negative sense, and to avoid the negativity. But I would just question, why does this negativity have to exist at all or to that degree? And there's going to be things like, I think I kind of skipped over it though, but as you kind of go about your day and develop an intuition about yourself, about who you are, what you need in a day, what fills your cup up with energy and hope and pride and what doesn't, you might find yourself, maybe the laundry could go for 2 weeks without being done. You really want to have it, your partner's coming home in an hour and you really want to get it done because you want to see their smile on their face, right? You can gain some kind of, not that you're doing it in this kind of logistical way, but you can gain some gratitude from your partner, your life partner, gain a sense of accomplishment in doing this task. Although it might not necessarily help you with your work task or help you figure out this family ordeal or this personal relationship ordeal. But it does give you something. It gives you some sort of sense to keep going. You know, what's this all for anyway? Like, why am I dealing with this stress and this overwhelm? But there can also be some times where if your goals aren't getting met, maybe it's too much protection. Thoughts might be creeping in where you're going like through multiple abstracts of, okay, if I do this and then that, oh, okay, what's the point? Right? Maybe you don't need that level of protection right now. Maybe it's more important to start on something and, you know, begin to go through, see what actually happens. You don't know. It's almost impossible to predict 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 abstractions down the road, talking weeks, months, and years of how this thing will play out. And although this part of you that's kind of considering these things, right, like it's that fine line again between positive, kind of productive planning your life to a degree and just getting caught up in the ifs and the whens, the buts, all from a protective stance. But maybe you don't need that much protection in this case. Let that curious, exploring part of you have the light of day, even if just for a glimpse, and to just go try something out. Just, you know, how is this going to fit into my life? How am I going to feel when I do that thing? Do I know that it's a bad outcome with absolute certainty? And how do I know that? And so that's kind of where we get into some of these unhealthy attitudes that undermine our efficiency and effectiveness. So this perfectionism, insisting that every task must be flawless, it ends up leading to procrastination and burnout. Letting perfection be the enemy of progress. Tell me, what is really perfect in this world, right? A lot of people tend to describe, you know, on a lot of things, many areas of life, right? What other people have done is almost darn near perfect. But what I'm doing and what I'm putting out isn't so. And it's this zooming in at such a fine grain of detail where, like, do things really need to be so perfect? Or could I put this out as it is, and then if it is truly a poor thing that I've put out, I can kind of learn from it, adjust, put it out again. And that, across many areas of life, that seems to be both a faster and more pragmatic way where you're conserving energy, time, to put something out there and then learn from it, and then reiterate version 2, version 3, version 4, then to try and forecast every way that version 2, 3, 4 are going to go poorly and greatly, and just never leave version 1, never even get it out the door. Another thing is all or nothing thinking. So if I don't work on this task for at least an hour every day, then what's the point? Resulting in inaction. Even though maybe you could have done it for 30 minutes, which is, you know, evidently better than nothing at all, right? So pushing another unhealthy attitude is pushing through this sense of overwhelm solely out of guilt or a fear of shame of, you know, not performing. This erodes that self-compassion that we talked about, that forgiveness, and overall your long-term productivity, because again you're still feeling this overwhelm. You're motivated by, you know, fear of shame, motivated by avoidance of feeling guilty, what have you. And I just ask, like, would you want to, if a friend came to you and said that their life was going so well and they were accomplishing everything, but then they said that they're not doing this they're not pushing through this overwhelm because they have so much hope on the other side, they look forward so much to the end result, but rather they know that if they don't do this, if they don't live this way, they'll never be accepted by their family, perhaps. Their family will never love them, so they have to do this thing. What would you say to a friend, or what would you think? Like, would you wish differently for them? And then so there's also like pride or an ego in being overscheduled and overwhelmed. It can become a status symbol almost for some people. You know, this person seems so successful. They seem so important because they're on every committee, or they got their fingers in every pie. What have you. They live like the perfect life. But this individual might find themselves being busy without necessarily being productive, like being or being in extreme discomfort while doing so. They're getting into like the motivational attitudes, right? Is it okay? Like I'm not gonna quit this committee that I volunteered for solely because I know if I quit, people will think that I'm not like an all-star or something. But like my whole life is barely holding together, right? And like in these positions, that's where kind of alluding to the first part of the video, but it's in these positions where then there's something unexpected happens. A health scare, maybe not even a scare, a very real negative health outcome. Something beyond the control, like something in the aspect of their sector, in the economy, begins to tank. There's layoffs, now they're like without a job. Maybe that would free up some of their time and not feel so overwhelmed. They're just like they're essentially living emotionally and energetically paycheck to paycheck. And then when something comes in that's impossible to predict, that's the kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for that individual. Those are some unhealthy attitudes just to look out for that kind of undermine one's efficiency and their effectiveness. But here are some healthy attitudes that will promote efficiency and effectiveness. So again, self-compassion. Treat yourself kindly when things slip up. This builds some resilience that it's not the end of the world. Remembering to speak with yourself as you would a friend. Have some flexibility, right? This can be so hard. Like as humans, we want to control everything and predict. It's one of the most, really why we're here watching this video. It is our greatest strength in the animal kingdom, is this ability to have foresight and use like predictions of our brain. But if you're not flexible enough, and when you have flexibility, you can view some of these lists as guides, not necessarily rigid rules, allowing adaptation to life's curveballs. Plus a little bit of like buffer in there too, that's helpful. Like life can also be spelt HASSELS, or hassles. Those are the famous words of Albert Ellis. Things can and will come up that you will never predict and have no ability to. These can be both helpful towards your goals and not so helpful at times. And so having some flexibility to adjust, to have some buffer to, okay, this task took me a little longer, or this thing, I just got invited to a party this weekend. I'd love to go. I haven't seen those friends. They're out of town. It was just a happenstance flight diversion that they're in town or something. Like having some flexibility there is very helpful. Also have some gratitude with yourself, right? Celebrate the small wins to maintain your momentum and your positivity. It's so easy to focus only on negatives. Again, that's a part of the human brain. The skeptical and anxious early humans that were facing like these tigers in the safari and cave bears and such. The skeptical and anxious people were the ones that often would have survived, and so it's a very powerful tool and very helpful. However, in this, and it normally focuses on the negativity and what can go wrong, or what's left to do, what's uncompleted. It's just how our brains are wired. But it's not all that serving in modern society where we don't have to have those types of fears. But taking even just a moment to reflect on something positive in your life, whether it was that day, the other week or month, or just something like a happy memory. I'm glad I did that, went on that vacation with my family. I had such a great time. And like kind of like your performance too. It's like, okay, I went on that vacation and I spent so much time with my nieces, or I had some good conversations with every family member and took the time to do that and was intentional. Just focusing on things like that can be helpful. It's like it's not all negative and what wasn't done, but what was done. What can you find some pride? Can you find some past joy? And look, like there's some people out there that have very dark, saddening pasts, and there's not a lot of things for them to recount. One suggestion I would have in that case, you're already on YouTube watching this, pause my video, just Google or just YouTube some sort of video of someone else expressing gratitude. Like if you're feeling very overwhelmed or just in a negative spot, Just watch that video of someone else being very thankful for something someone else did, like a moment in time where they are really happy with themselves. You know, humans are social animals, highly social, and we can often almost get that sense from watching someone else live it as well. And so, yeah, if you're at a loss of things to be grateful for, go watch a YouTube video on someone else being grateful and see what happens. Another healthy attitude, the final one here, and this isn't an exhaustive list, there's other ones, but just the ones that I've jotted down. It's kind of been said before, but getting comfortable with doing less and giving yourself permission to say no to some requests, at least for the next while. It doesn't mean it's permanent, but again, you're watching this video because there's overwhelm, very likely. Don't be stacking more things on an already overfilling plate at the buffet, right? Like this is an intentional and helpful contraction of your responsibilities and what you're going to do. It's not that you're doing this with like ill intentions in mind. It's, you know, you're doing this because at the moment you're already overstretched, right? And you don't want to further stretch this spring of your life, or it might just snap, right? And that doesn't sound very fun. But so you're just contracting it back a bit, not adding it, not contracting and then saying yes to a bunch of stuff and pulling yourself back out, but you're just contracting a bit, giving yourself some breathing room. And that can be just like a help, like it's not like a withdrawing in the negative sense where you failed in some way, but rather that you've identified, again, what is your priorities, what are your values. This thing that you could say yes to just isn't there, right? It's not on that list. Maybe it's something that you add to your list if it's not like a huge time crunch. Like if you have a month or two to think on this thing to say yes to, add it to your list, right? Add it to the very bottom and just, you know, think on it for a bit. It doesn't have to be an answer right away. But here's some times when these organizational tools aren't so helpful, and it kind of comes back to perfectionism and perfect planning. Tools can backfire if they're overused. The perfect planning trap often occurs when you spend more time organizing than acting, and endless tweaking of lists without execution. And so where a lot of this video is focused on the creation of some of these lists, you know, recognize that by deciding to cap this planning time for maybe 15 minutes at most. Maybe if you find yourself it's you know, you need half an hour or a good proper hour to sit down and collect your whole week, right? That's okay. But you know, if you find yourself spending an hour every single day organizing what you're even supposed to do, and that hour could be very useful to you, I would just question, you know, how are you bringing this perfectionism into the list itself? And, you know, by releasing it even in that list might be like the first step of kind of chipping away at this tendency to, okay, my whole list has to be perfect, this thing in my life has to be perfect. It can be an act where the list doesn't have to be perfect. I can always renew it, I can always add to it, I can adjust it as time goes on, but it's more important that I get the things done on my list done than to think and put more stuff on the list or have it perfectly prioritized. Right? There might be a lot of, especially those like 1, 2, 3 types of commitments that are high up on the list. They might in effect be the same importance level, and it's just a hair's width difference between them. Just put them up there. They're up in the top. They're up in the top ones. Start. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or 2. Pick at number 1 for half an hour. Pick at number 2 for half an hour. Maybe in that act of picking at them, you realize, okay, number 2 is going to take me a lot longer than I anticipated. Okay, now with this new information, okay, maybe I'll pick at it, 1 extra time a day or 2 extra times a day over these other 2 things, and kind of on the fly shifts to a more involved commitment. Shift your focus to the imperfect action for real progress, right? Like what we just said. And we've mentioned this a little earlier, but you can tackle an unfamiliar task that you've been avoiding to gain some of that competence, right? That maybe it's the bathroom, maybe it's something in the yard, the garage or the basement needs a good clean up and straighten up, what have you. It might take you an hour to do those things, but you can gain some sort of, okay, I've accomplished something here. And this is just kind of like a way, it's not necessarily going to help with perfect planning, but just an example as to, imperfect action is often better than perfect planning. And in some of these things, it's like it's more important to do something small or to do something and to gain that shred or even significant chunk of momentum than to perfectly plan it all out. Make your bed, clean up the dishes, go for a short walk. You might even be able to leave the planning exercise and almost plan in your head to a degree, like these contemplations, and at least be doing some sort of almost mindless type of task while you're planning. And this might be contributing to that whirlwind as well, though, right? But if you're getting quagmired down, okay, what can I do right now? What can I do? Yeah, sometimes these tools definitely backfire if they're overused. The perfect planning trap occurs when you spend more time organizing these things with endless tweaking of these lists, of prepping, of reflecting, considering. There's a time and place for all of those things, but there comes a point where action must be taken. You can think on these things all you want and try and forecast. Think, okay, if this happens, I'll do that. If this happens, I'll do that. But that can take a lot of time. And in this perfect planning trap scenario, it's as long as the outcomes and the consequences aren't too bad and aren't going to be permanent and are short-term potentially, it's smart and prudent to think of these things. Okay, what's out there to look for, kind of on a surface level, or where might it go? But only one of those realities is going to be real, right? And so if you end up spending so much time considering 5, 10 different realities, 10 different ways that this could go, and then past that another layer, it's considerable time out of your day. It's often better to say, okay, I'm going to be aware of some of the risks, that's important, but I'm going to go do it. Learn through experience, through trial and error to a degree, with keeping in mind that these things, what to look out for, so there's not catastrophic failure. But most of the time, and for a lot of things and situations in life, it can be a lot quicker to trial and error, assess, okay, what is the reality of the situation, and then learn from that and re-implement something than it is to perfectly plan every potential outcome. But everybody's going to have their own difference in the amount of comfort there. Like one person's, oh my God, they're planning it to death. Planning this thing for 2 weeks straight, for 2 months straight is going to seem way overblown. For other people, that's going to be what they need. But just to be aware of it, like if things just feel stagnant or the plans aren't developing, I guess like what to look out for though in the perfect planning trap. You might not ever really feel ready, right? But there's going to come a time when that desire for change exceeds the discomfort of, have I predicted these things? And if that's even there just a bit, that, I could do this, I could try, I could give it a go, I would encourage you to lean into that if it's there, even a little spark, and to grow that flame, than to just continue to plan even more, That spark will naturally grow, but it can also get diminished by over planning. And so often we're looking out for how can it go wrong. Sometimes there's almost a degree of optimistic naivety or uninformed optimism that can be helpful, where you don't know all the ways in which something will go wrong, but there's that hope that you can do it, that you will be able to see it through. And then when the rubber hits the road, you might become informed pessimist, and oh my goodness, there's so much about this situation that I didn't know about myself, how I handle this thing. But that's then you're already on that next step, right? Which one of those 10 realities is that next now a learning situation or like platform or advancement? Now you're here. Now you know that much more about the situation, how it is in reality, how it is for you. And then you can kind of work from there to be an informed optimist, where now that you know these things about yourself and how to look at them, how to mitigate the risks even further, how to play to your strengths, now you can kind of begin to get some of that hope again, but from an even more informed place. So that's the trap of perfect planning. You can also set some brackets around these things. If like I will make a decision by 2 weeks from now, and I'm going to spend 15 minutes a day planning it out. That's, if you did that for 2 weeks, 14 times 15, 60 minutes in an hour, so that'd be 3.5 hours of planning, broken down across 2 weeks. That's a pretty considerable amount of time to reflect, to plan. I consider that anyway, like on something that's meaningful and it's going to have like medium and long-term impacts in your life. So bracketing it like that, kind of giving yourself a artificial time constraint, but kind of beholden to yourself that both wants to plan, but also that part of yourself that wants to see some progress done with the plans, kind of playing both sides. It's also in that action, and there's a momentum in that action. First couple steps you take might be stumbles, there might be trips, there might be little small steps. That's why I'd always encourage little steps at the start. That way there's a less likelihood of stumbling and smashing your face on the ground. But with that, you gain that momentum, that confidence, even just a shred that, okay, I've done this, and that thought wasn't there for as long, or I'm proud of that, or I'm feeling okay, like if I can do that, I can maybe look at this other part that I've been considering to be like way more difficult, but I considered this one maybe medium difficult and turned out to be not that bad, right? But that momentum is a huge part of it, and and you only really get that by taking action. So again, watch out for the trap of perfect planning, So yeah, maybe I should have put this at the start, but this next section is just watching for the signs of overwhelm. So when people are overwhelmed, it affects them in basically every way, from their emotions, their thoughts, physical symptoms, their energy, their willingness to try something new, like all of these. It could be feeling forgetful or confused, struggling to concentrate, hesitating on making decisions, making more mistakes, being consumed with negative emotions, not wanting to socialize, sleeping poorly, low energy, turning to coping mechanisms that are, maybe I'll put in here, unhealthy coping mechanisms. Because, there's definitely a lot of healthy ones too, if you're, going to the gym, going for a walk, breath work, sitting down with your thoughts, reflecting. But all in all, really, for the signs of overwhelm, it's this person's unable to accomplish their goals, or at the very least is having quite an uncomfortable, low-quality life as they go about their goals. There's definitely times when a person is well off to buckle down and just get the work done, grind for a bit. But one must also understand that prolonged periods of this mindset will often lead to overwhelm and long-term exhaustion, quite literally grinding them down psychologically, physically, emotionally. Just by the very, overwhelm is such a broad, there's a lot of reasons people can get overwhelmed. It could be everything in their life's going great, but in this one aspect, they're overwhelmed. They don't have the tools, or the thoughts are unbearable, the emotions are unbearable. And it all comes back to, is your quality of life in this area or globally across your whole life unreasonable by your own opinion? And if so, perhaps it's looking at, is there overwhelm happening? Is there a shutting down of your ability to, strive in that area, to not be up at night thinking, oh my goodness, I have to go do this thing tomorrow. I have to do that every single day, every single week. I have this obligation or responsibility. But yeah, that's kind of to not repeat myself too much. But really the bottom line with this whole video, mastering that to-do list, and I mean that almost more so in the metaphorical sense, where all of your responsibilities, obligations, things you want to do, that you could do, that you are doing, that you're not doing, this list, it's all about being mindful of the decisions that you're taking at every step to accomplish these things. Acknowledging overwhelm can be one of those. Choosing tools and attitudes that serve you, that work for you, that help you not feel so overwhelmed, so that you can reach and strive towards those goals, those outcomes. Efficiency isn't doing more, it's about doing what matters with less stress in this sense. To contribute to that, orderly routines, taking time to rest and relax, time for favorite activities, asking for help when needed. You'd be surprised how many times if someone asks for help, there are people out there in most people's lives that are willing to help in some degrees. Maybe it's less than you'd like them to, but even in some capacity, they'll help. A supportive ear, maybe a shift in schedule, what have you. Doing like an extra chore around the house. That's why though, I guess at the end of the day though, if you're feeling overwhelmed in your life and it persists, then, and it doesn't seem to be going away, right? That's one of the areas that I, as a Kelowna counsellor, can help you with, is provide some personalized strategies, support, resource you with different tools, help you kind of prioritize different things in your life based on your goals, help you decide really what it is about you, why you want to be doing these things. All of these things, all in all, my role in this sense as a Kelowna therapist, it helps you understand yourself that much better and then underwrite your own opinion on how you'll move forward from here. What is a course of action that I think is reasonable, that's acceptable, that's in line with who I am as a person. And there's lots of steps in between there in the conversation that we'll have. I think that's it for this one. But thank you for watching. And thank you for watching.